we are likely to be surprised by the form it takes. We may not even notice that it is happening because we are looking in the wrong places. Contemporary political science has little to say about new ways that democracy might fail because it is preoccupied with a different question: how democracy gets going in the first place. This is understandable. During the period that democracy has spread around the world, the process has often been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Democracy might get tentatively established in parts of Africa or Latin America or Asia, and then a coup or military takeover would snuff it out before someone tried again. This has happened in places from Chile to South Korea to Kenya. One of the central puzzles of political science is what causes democracy to stick. It is fundamentally a question of trust. People with something to lose from the results of an election have to believe it is worth persevering until the next time. The rich need to trust that the poor won't take their money. The soldiers need to trust that the civilians won't take their guns. Often, that trust breaks down. Then democracy falls apart. As a result, political scientists tend to think of democratic failure in terms of what they call backsliding. A democracy reverts back to the point before lasting confidence in its institutions could be established. This is why we look for earlier examples of democratic failure to illuminate what might go wrong in the present. We assume that the end of democracy takes us back to the beginning. The process of creation goes into reverse. In this book, I want to offer a different perspective. What would political failure look like in societies where confidence in democracy is so firmly established that it is hard to shake? The question for the 21st century is how long we can persist with institutional arrangements we have grown so used to trusting that we no longer notice when they have ceased to work. These arrangements include regular elections, which remain the bedrock of democratic politics, but they also encompass democratic legislatures, independent law courts, and a free press. All can continue to function as they ought, while failing to deliver what they should. A hollowed-out version of democracy risks lulling us into a false sense of security. We might continue to trust in it and to look to it for rescue, even as we seethe with irritation at its inability to answer the call. Democracy could fail while remaining intact. This analysis might seem at odds with the frequent talk about the loss of trust in democratic politics and politicians across Western societies. It is true that many voters dislike and distrust their elected representatives now more than ever. But it is not the kind of loss of trust that leads people to take up arms against democracy. Instead, it is the kind that leads them to throw up their arms in despair. Democracy can survive that sort of behaviour for a long time. Where it ends up is an open question and one I will try to answer. But it does not end up in the 1930s. We should try to avoid the Benjamin Button view of history, which imagines that old things become young again even as they acquire more experience. History does not go into reverse. It is true that contemporary Western democracy is behaving in ways that seem to echo some of the darkest moments in our past. Anyone who watched protesters with swastikas demonstrating on the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, and then heard the President of the United States managing to find fault on both sides, could be forgiven for fearing the worst. However, grim though these events are, they are not the precursors of a return to something we thought we'd left behind. We really have left the 20th century behind. We need another frame of reference. So let me offer a different analogy. It is not perfect, but I hope it helps make sense of the argument of this book. Western democracy is going through a midlife crisis. That is not to trivialize what's happening. Midlife crises can be disastrous and even fatal. And this is a full-blown crisis. But it needs to be understood in relation to the exhaustion of democracy as well as to its volatility, and to the complacency that is currently on display, as well as to the anger. The symptoms of a midlife crisis include behaviour we might associate with someone much younger. But it would be a mistake to assume that the way to understand what's going on